U.S. society, what is it? It's pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Right? Give it some good old-fashioned elbow grease, right? This idea that if you can do anything, if you just go out and work hard enough, right? And that you shouldn't feel compassion for people that are destitute or without what they need because they just haven't worked hard enough, right? Right, because anyone can do anything if they just go out and work hard enough. And don't pay attention to other people. It's all about individualism. A man's house is his castle, right? That's very Odinist, right? And it's interesting, and a lot of the criticism that gets thrown at socialists and leftists is very Odinist, I would say, right? So they say, well, you know, that America and capitalism is all about the American dream. It's all about people coming from a new land and making great sacrifices and working really hard, and that's capitalism. And what are these socialists? They're a bunch of lazy weaklings who just want everything handed to them, right? They're just a bunch of weak, pathetic people, and they don't understand what America's all about, and they ought to move to some other country, but the American way is working really hard and struggle and grit, right? That's what we hear from the right wing constantly. But think about it. I'd say that it's completely off, because I want everyone in their minds to picture Fidel Castro. Was Fidel Castro a weakling or a snowflake? No. What about Hugo Chavez, right? Picture Hugo Chavez, right? Just a pathetic, weakling, whining snowflake. Does anyone here know what Stalin literally means? Right? And I think if you look over the history of socialism around the world, you can see a lot of that struggle and grit and sacrifice. Talk about the 5-year plans, right? So in 1928, the Soviet Union announced to the world that they were going to have a 5-year economic plan, and they showed it to all kinds of advisors and different people, and the world said this is impossible. No country can ever do this. No country could possibly carry out this 5-year plan. So the Soviet leaders came back and they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to carry out this 5-year plan in 4 years. And they painted that slogan everywhere, 5-year plan in 4 years. And they did it. One of my favorite writers is Anna Louise Strong, and she's a journalist. She was from Seattle, and she lived in the Soviet Union, and she saw it with her own eyes. A country that was deeply impoverished became a global superpower. They built the world's largest hydroelectric power plant at the time, the Dnieper Dam, right? They built the world's largest steel industry, right? They brought running water and electricity to the entire country. An entire country was basically illuminated. There was all this planning, right? Or you can talk, I mean, it wasn't just the Soviet Union, right? You can talk about what China has done. China used to be the sick man of Asia, one of the poorest countries in the world. Today, China is producing half the steel in the world. They've got the world's largest hydroelectric power plant, the Three Gorges Dam. They have the world's biggest telecommunications manufacturer. They have raised 700 million people out of poverty. Huge, huge achievements have been carried out. But you can go beyond Russia and China, right? Talk to Egyptians, right? What is the pride and joy of Egypt? It's the Aswan Dam, this huge hydroelectrical facility constructed by Abdel Nasser, the Arab socialist leader, in coordination with the Soviet Union. It's just a huge, huge achievement of infrastructure, bringing electricity to Egypt. Or why is the name Fidel Castro known all over the world? Why do people know about Fidel Castro? It's because he took a deeply impoverished island and built it up and developed it and built a healthcare system that is just the wonder, the model that people all over the world aspire to. Has anyone ever heard the phrase gung-ho? Gung-ho? Well, where does that come from? Well, that comes from the fact that during the Second World War, the U.S. military, the U.S. Marine Corps, was so impressed with the military tactics that Mao was using to fight the Japanese invaders, that they actually started adopting some of the tactics. And what does gung-ho mean, right? It means all together, all for one, joint effort, right? So tell me, the first person in space, was his name Joe Bob, Steve Smith, Bill Allen Richard, what was his name? Oh yeah, Yuri Gagarin, right? It was a Russian, right? Socialism doesn't invent anything, Caleb. Really, well, who are the first people in outer space then? And you don't have to take my word for it, right? Read Time magazine, what Time magazine was saying back in the 1930s. Read what was being said by Albert Einstein, the most well-respected physicist. You can read what was being written in the journals of the young Nelson Mandela. Read what he has to say. At the time that the Soviet Union was developing and emerging, you had the Communist Party of the United States that was a massive organization. And it was telling people, look, we've lost that American dream. We've lost that American spirit, that entrepreneurialism, that motor-mindedness. We've lost it. But if you go to the Soviet Union, they said the Soviet Union is the new America, and communism is 20th century Americanism. That's one of the slogans that they actually used. Socialism is all about grit and struggle and sacrifice, but It's about building up and building up your community, building up your world, but doing it in a way that doesn't come at the expense of somebody else. You know, people say socialists want everyone to be poor. No, I would say it's the opposite. Socialists want everybody to be rich. They just don't want anyone to get rich by exploiting somebody else or by hurting and making somebody else poor. That's the idea.